Hey guys, welcome back to Surveying with Robert's podcast. So I decided to put this podcast on YouTube because I had somebody on YouTube hit me up and tell me that he was in Canada and that he could not, he does not have an iPhone, so he couldn't get to iTunes, and he also does not have Pandora. Well, that's the two places where I've put this podcast at for right now, trying to figure out the whole podcasting thing, right? So I decided to record this, put it on YouTube. Turned out to be more of a challenge than I originally planned on, but I got it done. So Colt and I interviewed James Reville from Ireland. He has the SurvIpod. He is the surveyor that came up with the tool to set your robotic total station, or I think you could even use it for GPS. He's the one that designed, and developed this. So Colt and I interviewed him, and here is the interview. Hope you guys enjoy this podcast. Like I said, it's a little over an hour long. Not really, a little bit long for YouTube, but I guess we'll make it work, right? So you guys enjoy this. Hey guys, welcome back to another Surveying with Robert podcast. So another episode here. We've got James from across the pond. I'm going to let James introduce himself. Tell us all about who he is, what he does. I thought it might be interesting for us surveyors to know more about what's going on, you know, in other countries and stuff with surveyors and things like that. So I got Colt here with me. Colt's going to help me. We're gonna talk to James. We're gonna kind of pick his brain a little bit about some of the stuff he does. So Colt, say hi.
Good morning.
It is morning, and what? It's 6 o'clock here. It's noon in Ireland, there, James.
Yeah, noon in Ireland here. So it's my name is James Reville from SurvIpod. So my background is a surveyor in construction in the UK, and I worked for a number of years for high-rise construction in the UK, where I quickly learned that I had difficulty in finding places to set up for a few years surveying equipment on high-rise concrete structures. So I come up with the idea of the original SurvIpod.
So
And yes.
You've got like we were talking about this, and you said something about there's some kind of casing that you actually put in the concrete, and you can set this thing up. That's one way to do it.
Yeah, so you cast a sleeve into a wall or a column of the structure. So normally on a high-rise structure, you've got a decked level which is being formed, and you've got columns and walls that have already been formed. So at the deck level, you cast in a sleeve which is cast into a wall or a column, and that sleeve is used then to receive the original SurvIpod. You set your survey equipment on top to lay out from there.
So is that kind of wall or column, what have you? Is that something that's going to be incorporated into the building later? Or is it something specific to your setup?
So the wall or column is a part of the structure. So as you build on a concrete frame structure, you build the floor, you build columns, and as the columns are being built, you cast in a sleeve into that wall or column in your chosen location for the setup. So you drop the sleeve into wet concrete in the wall or column, and then you drop the SurvIpod into that sleeve when it's suitable to do so. So when it's safe up on the decked area, and it's suitable to lay out.
Oh, that's interesting. So this came out of a necessity for you as far as a surveyor trying to figure out how to do layout on high-rise buildings and stuff.
Yeah, so it was a project in London, and it was a high-rise structure. On that particular structure, the stair core and lift shaft, where I would normally set a tripod up on, were rising 2 floors ahead of where I was marking out the floor and the services and all the different things that make up the structure. So I had nowhere to set up a tripod. There was no setting up on top of a deck wouldn't be suitable, and I would never have done that. So the only solution I had was I decided to come up with the idea of the sleeve version and I trialed it, I patented it, and it went from there. It really worked really well, and I suppose it provided a security where security of a tripod wasn't there, provided a platform where you couldn't set up. So that's how I came up with it.
So give us a little bit of history about your background, where you started at, and then how you got into construction and all up to the necessity.
Yeah, so I started out in a fabrication workshop in 1998, and as a designer draftsman, and then led on from there in 2001 to layout on construction sites. So part of my early experience would have been I would have had a site experience, construction site experience anyway, but then it led to layout on construction sites with the use of Sokia and Topcon equipment at the time. And then later that led on to Leica use. I suppose that Leica was the most widely used for me. And I would have used that then from 2003 up to when I left the UK in 2014. And I worked on, from 2003, I worked on high-rise concrete structures, and which the SurvIpod was an integral part of that. It helped me in many projects.
So yeah, so I can see. I mean, because I've done a lot of building layout myself, and I can see where it's really important when you're doing layout that you set up in the same spot, right? So that I've seen problems with guys using tripods where they move around the building, chasing their control around, and actually lose control because you're not setting up in the same spot every time. So I can see where that would be almost totally, super important, right? I mean, because I'm just picturing in my mind that I've got this thing set up, and when I come back tomorrow or day after tomorrow, it's still in the same spot. Yeah, I don't have to do anything. If I resect off of something or whatever, my tripod never moves.
Well, and I've seen in I was at a seminar several years ago where we talked about control, and the suggestion for repeatable control was you placed a tripod in a concrete form essentially and formed it up in concrete so that the tripod just became part of the job site. But essentially, that's the same thing you've got here with the SurvIpod. However, it's reusable and it is permanent control.
Yeah, so there is a project local to me here in Ireland where they're using the bolt-down version of the SurvIpod, and they're using it as permanent control on the site. Mm-hmm. So the particular site is a large hospital project, and it's they have the bolt-down version dotted around the project for permanent control during the build and during all phases of construction. Similar to that, I have another project in Greenland. It's an airport project, and there's a demolition process at the very start of the project where they have to break down to where they need to reach. It's all in Greenland, it's all rock, so they have to break down to formation level, and they've got the bolt down version dotted around the project for control during demolition and during construction. So that's a project that's ongoing at the moment.
So does the bolt down version, does it just bolt down to the anchor bolts or form bolts, or if it's red iron construction, it bolts onto a fitting of the structure itself?
The way it's done is you've got concrete screw-in tape and self-tapping anchors. So you drill a hole and you tap the concrete with the anchor itself, and they're removable and reusable. So it makes it very easy. It takes 3 minutes to set up the hole fix, and with the sleeve version, you drop it into the sleeve where it's cast in. So it's a very easy setup, very maneuverable piece of equipment, and lightweight. So it's something that the surveyor can really leave in the area where he needs to reuse it, and come back to it on the following setup. It's very, very easy to use.
I could see that to be very useful on an existing construction site where, there may be some remodeling or new fabrication going on, an extension of a building, and you needed to set up in the existing structure.
Yeah. So I suppose the good thing about the bolt-down version is it can be set up in an area where it's very busy. You might have a lot of other trades, and you might be on an existing structure. If it's not an issue to drill the concrete floor, it's the best way and most secure way to set up, and know that if you're using a robotic total station or whatever, it's not going to get knocked over. Same way as using a scanner. If you're using the scanner, it's not going to be an issue.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That because I've had cases, in the past, a guy come by with carrying a piece of sheetrock or something and hit my tripod. So yeah, I wouldn't have to worry about it.
It's a common occurrence, yeah.
So tell me about surveying in Ireland. So what, how is your license structure as far as, surveying license over in Europe and stuff like that? Is there you guys got some kind of process over there?
Well, there is training. In most instances, as part of construction management courses, and there is land surveying training as well. But in relation to construction management, there'll be a module in layout, and then the engineer will be provided training on site when they eventually lead out to site. But there is, as regards licensing on set out in the UK, there is it's very limited. There isn't land surveyors are licensed, but it's not necessarily surveyors on construction sites. But they do. They have most have degree background in construction management or in surveying.
I've trained several guys that had construction management degrees, and I had to train them on how to, do layout and stuff like that right over the years. So that's kind of the way it is over here in the U.S. There's a few places that I've been, like I did some work in Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, if you staked out like a sewer line or something, a licensed surveyor or a licensed engineer, when you gave a cut sheet to the contractor, it had to be stamped. And then I think in Mississippi, the DOT requires that. It's the contractor's responsible for the construction. But if you're not working for the contractor, if you're not employed by the contractor, then I think you have to be a licensed surveyor to do construction layout on like a DOT project. So I was wondering over there, it seems like it's different everywhere. I've got some people I talked to like in South Africa and stuff like that, and Australia, and it just seems like it seems real similar. Surveying seems to be the whole industry seems to be pretty similar here as it is over there.
Yeah, it is similar. Like as regards set out in Ireland, you've got main contractors and you've got subcontractors. Usually the main contractor or general contractor over in the US is the guy are the company that employ the surveyors to carry out layout or set out on site. Whereas in the UK, the subcontractor, most subcontractors will have their own layout teams. And I don't know why it's done that way, but that's the way it's set up in the UK. And I think it's more, I think you've more control on usually in the UK, you've got engineers working on site, working for subcontractors, and then the work is checked by the main contractor. And I think it works out better. There's always someone there to oversee and to ensure that everything's been placed correctly.
Yeah, so it's kind of pretty similar over here. I mean, it really kind of depends on project per project, but an engineer will do the design, they'll release the plans. The contractor will, bid the project, he'll get it, and then he'll hire somebody to do layout. So, pretty similar.
Yeah.
How do you guys, as far as GPS, state plane coordinates, all that other stuff, how does that work over there?
Your GMs?
But yeah, we like GPS wouldn't have used GPS on our projects. We would have had the control would have been given to us by companies that would have been brought in to coordinate with GPS, and then we take the control into the site from global coordinates to local coordinates, and that's the way we would have done it. and it would just standard total stations, not even robotic when I was doing it, but it's all robotic here now. Every site has robotic total stations now.
Yeah, so that's pretty similar to the way it is here. I mean, for the most part, we would consider that plant coordinates. So you would be either on an assumed coordinate system or it's been moved, like you were talking about. So it's pretty similar, over here, same way. So, I got you sent me two of your SurvIpods, and I've got them out here. I still have them wrapped up. I haven't touched them yet because I want to do almost like an unboxing video, right, on them and show them. And then I want to set them up out here, actually in front of my shop building out here where I do all my video stuff. So that was one thing I noticed was how lightweight they were. I've been over to pick it up. You know how you are. You're like, okay, this is going to be heavy. Prepare yourself. And I was like, wow, this thing weighs nothing. So what kind of material are you making that out of?
So it's mild steel. 3 millimeters thick, circular hollow section. So it's lightweight, but it's very robust. Thing about the products, they last a very long time if you look after them. What tends to happen on construction sites, they're misused. But yeah, they will. If you look after them, they'll look after you. So that's the way they're very robust. They're 12 or 24 pounds is what they would weigh in pounds. So they all vary in weight, but they're all in around the same kind of weight, 24 pounds.
Colt, I don't know about you, but I'm impressed. He said 24 pounds. I was waiting for that metric thing.
Yeah,
right?
I was getting ready to convert myself.
Well, it's 11 kilos, 11.5 kilos.
There we
That's
go.
kind of, yeah.
24 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
24 pounds.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm really interested in getting those out and playing with them. I've really had to slap my hands because they really look like they're powder coated. They're just, do you build them yourself? You have somebody manufacture those for you or what?
Yeah, they're manufactured locally here in Ireland. So they're manufactured by a local fabricator, and they're manufactured by a local fabricator, and then they're powder coated locally as well, and then they're shipped from here in Wexford. So I ship for the UK. I have a separate manufacturing. I have a manufacturing in London for the UK, but elsewhere in the world, it's done here in Ireland. And the reason for the manufacturing in the UK is due to Brexit, and that's one of the things to make it easier to have products in the UK. It's easier to manufacture in there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you exclusively market and work with your equipment, or do you still do layout work for high-rise construction companies and that kind of thing?
No, it's exclusive on my products now. It's too busy. So I sell in the US, I sell in Canada, I have resellers in a good few different countries now. And it's just all about growing the business and developing new ideas.
Sure.
So I have 4 different versions of the product now, and a few other products. But really, I want to work on developing that and moving forward with helping surveyors come up with solutions that really aren't there. And that's what we want to continue doing.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what that's kind of my thing too, right? That's with the survey equipment and everything I do is I'm trying to figure out how to improve our industry, right? How to move things forward. So I've been talking to a lot of people about these things, and I was actually at the city of Dothan, Alabama yesterday, and we had a big discussion about, I even showed them your website and everything, about setting up, I use Sailor a lot with GPS equipment. So these guys are going out and basically doing GIS mapping stuff. And we were talking about using like a Trimble R12 with the SIM card in it and going cell phone based rover. And I told him, I said, you could take with this SurvIpod on different like city pieces of property and stuff and set this thing up. And then you could put your GPS in a secure location. Because, the thing about it is with GPS, the height is not an issue. It's what you've got around you as far as, obstacles and stuff, right?
Multipath error.
Yeah. So just to me, I thought that was another good use for it. So rather than, I mean, with you doing construction layout, you're thinking about setting a robot up on it. And with me, I'm thinking about all the different uses. Talked to another guy that does, they do this track layout, this robotic type thing goes on in, I can't remember what industry they're actually in, but they have like this train track they have to lay out. And that's what we talked about, was the one that you've got that's got the 90 degree on it, and bolting that to a wall and being able to do all their layout. Because a lot of people don't know how to do high precision layout. They don't understand how to keep those tolerances. And that's, to me, that's an integral part. That total station,
that's everything.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it starts
it's
right there.
Yeah. And if you don't understand that, then you shouldn't be doing that work.
Repeatability is impossible without quality control.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, so what I would have done in my career, I would have agreed control with the main contractor. So as working for a subcontractor, I'd agreed control with the main contractor, bring in the control for the build, agree that again with the main contractor, and then worked from there and use that control for the duration of the project. And then there's no questions, and everyone is happy with how it's controlled, as long as you use that control throughout the project. And for high rise, I would have used plumb up points as well as carried out resections and checked back to my plumb up points. So really, the error is very minimal if you do have an error.
Well, you know, that's resections is a funny thing, because I talk to guys all the time and that are working in different areas, and it's like they're scared to death to do a resection. And I'm like, that's the only way you can keep the precision, in my mind, on a site, is if you've got if you're doing resection off of known points that you're using for the whole site. I mean, I can do a resection off of something that I've shot in, and I mean, it's thousands. And these guys want to take a prism pole and a prism and a nail and go get a back sight, and they think that's high precision work. It's not even close.
No. You whatever you're using as backside or control, it has to be stable, robust, and you have to have numerous control points, controlled from the original control. That's, I would have always, you know, if you're doing a resection, you will have to have minimum 3 for me. And the more you have, the better. Absolutely. And the more accurate you're going to be.
Exactly. You know, but, so forgives on the geometry, right?
Yeah, that's all it is. It is only geometry, and that's what people don't seem to, you know, some people focus on the fact that you have to set up over a point. That's not the case. If you have a good resection, it's as good as any point setup.
So that's I do a lot of integrated surveying where I'm using the GPS and the robot together, and that's the first thing. All the surveyors look at me and go, "You're not setting a nail underneath the tripod? Why? I don't need one." So I actually made up for some surveyors. It was one of those kind of like you, right? So it came out of a need. So I had a surveyor that I was doing training with him, and he had a backsite. Backsite was like 1,000 foot away. We walked in there, we go to shoot the backsite. We get halfway back to the gun. He goes, "Crap, I screwed that up." We went back about 4 times. We had to walk back and forth. When I left him, I went down to the local print shop, and I got them to print me up some little, it's the same size as a business card, but it's on reflective material, and it's got a crosshair on it. It's got a place to put a point number, and I put the company I work for, NEI, I put that logo on the bottom of it. And I started giving those out to surveyors. I'm like, "Here, use this for a backsite. Use this for a resection." Because, man, I tell you what, that walking back and forth, don't work for me.
No. And yeah, you can do a quick setup if you have your controls set in place, and your resection, you know, it's faster. You don't have to do a prism setup. It makes it a lot faster anyway, you know. But again, in relation to the bolt down version, you can do your resections from that. You know, if you have from the dig and the muck away part of the build, you can have your control set up, concreted in, and use that control from the very start of the project throughout the build. And that's what is happening with the bolt down version in a lot of projects.
Yeah, that guy I talked to about the track, that's what we were looking at. He was trying to figure out maybe He was talking about maybe bolting a plate to the wall and then being able to go in every time they need to go do something and take that and bolt it to that. And that's what he was looking at, doing something like that. So he could take it off, because it might be months before he goes back to that project again. So he could take it off and it wouldn't be in anybody's way. Yeah. And I was like, that'd work out pretty good.
Yeah. So, but alternative to that, you can cast in, or no, you can use a drop-in anchor. So you can drill a hole, drop in an anchor, and use that to bolt to the wall, bolt your bolt fix 90 to the wall, and then you can cap those. When you take away the bolt fix 90, you can cap them temporarily while you're away, and then come back and uncap them and bolt it to the same location again. You don't, it's very easy to do that as well. So different options.
Nifty. It's amazing how surveyors, we're all what's the word I'm looking for? Creative, maybe. We're I've built things to go on four-wheelers, and I built a hitch one time on the back of my truck probably 2000. I had a 5700 GPS unit, and I was topoing fields. So I actually went down and got a receiver hitch. I took a piece of probably like 1-inch pipe and welded it to it, put me a 5/8 thread at the top of it where it was just above the back end of the truck, and I screwed my GPS antenna on it, and I ended up having to drill a hole in the hitch and put a bolt because it would like wobble, right? So when I'd be driving it, the antenna would be flopping around back there. So I did that, fixed it up, tightened it, and there is no telling. I bet you I towboat 1,000 acres with that thing. But just that necessity, that surveyor ingenuity, right? Coming up with something, it's cool. And so I know you, and then Matt, that's got the party chief vest. I really appreciate what you guys do, because you found a need and you filled it with a product. And surveying, we steal. All of our equipment comes from some other industry somewhere, right? Maybe with the exception of our total station, I don't know, but I bet if we look back, that probably was stolen too. But so the fact that we can actually create our own tools is pretty sweet in my mind.
Yeah, it is. I think engineers are inventive anyway. If you work in construction, I think in a lot of instances, you have to overcome problems on site, and it's the daily occurrence, and you have to be ingenuitive and come up with solutions daily. And that's probably part of the training for an engineer on site. And it's really how they become inventive, I suppose.
Problem solvers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the way it is, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question going back to the control. My background is not really in high-rise construction. We don't have high-rise anything in this part of the country that I've worked on.
High-rise is a 2-story building around here.
That's right. Right. But as far as construction layout, I would say the vast majority of this area is not high-rise construction, but more road layout and sewer, drainage, this kind of construction. So on a high-rise construction, I guess first off, what constitutes high-rise considered, as opposed to low-rise?
Well, I think low-rise would be considered anything below 4 stories would be low-rise to me anyway, and above that you're getting into the high-rise. It's not. That's what I think anyway. It's easier. It's control on low-rise if you have. It's easier to control the building, far easier to control the building for layout on low rise. As you rise up, it's more difficult because it's harder to see your points for resection. It's far more difficult as you rise up through the building. If you're doing 20, 30-story buildings or more, it's very difficult to maintain control throughout the build.
Sure. So does that control as it goes up? How do you traverse vertically? You said they're constructing 2 floors higher than where you're actually working. So how do you get that to the next floor up? Do you do a resection to get up higher? Is each floor relative to itself? So it's independent control each floor as it goes up, or how does that work?
No, so usually you'll have 4 plumb-up points in a building footprint. So from the ground floor, you'll set out those plumb-up points, and those plumb-up points will be brought up vertically through the build. So you will use outside control. You'd set up the tripod, or sorry, you'd set up the SurvIpod on the edge of the building, use your, do a resection as you normally do, back check to your control points, your plumb-up points in the building, and that maintains control. So you will always know that if you have an error, then there's a problem. But at that stage, if there's no error, continue on with your layout. It's going to be accurate.
So as the building goes up, the higher the building goes, I'm assuming that there's some sway or some horizontal swaying in the building. So how do you compensate for that as the vertical plumb up point goes up? Theoretically, it's plumb, but yet the building is swaying. So how do you compensate or account for those kinds of errors as the building rises?
It is very difficult to compensate. It's something that it's an ongoing issue with high-rise structures. You will, I suppose, the best thing to do is if the building is not, I would have done it, the layout part, I would wait till most of the operatives weren't on the building. So if it's a morning time, or if it's before everyone starts on site, you carry out the layout, because the more activity on the building, the more it's going to sway. And usually the best time to do it is when there's less people on the building, because and that would ensure that the layout is accurate. But I'd always back checked what I'd done before, and to ensure that the layout is as accurate as it can be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that being an issue, because a 30-story building with a little bit of wind, and
yeah,
it could. I could see that getting a little crazy. So when you say define for me the plumb up point, when you say plumb up point, what does that actually look like?
So a plumb up point is a coordinated point marked on the floor. So whether you use a nail to mark that point, or it'll be pinpoint coordinate marked on the ground floor. You will have 4 of those points. And usually you can see all 4 from a few locations on the floor. Then those points you on the upper floors are marked out with box. There's a box, usually a 4-inch square box, will be used to bring up the plumb up points. So every floor will have a box in it to allow the laser to be passed through that floor. So you have a laser point, vertical plumb laser is what you use to bring up the points.
And
that is very interesting. Is that typically near an elevator shaft or anything, or is it just a hole through the floor all the way to the ground?
It can be. It depends on the layout of the building. You usually have 1 either end of the building and 2 in the middle of the building. And usually you will be able to see all 4 from each location. You'll be able to see the other 3 points. And it ensures accuracy of the build. So if you're using outside control to back check into the inside plumb up points, then your building is set out accurately. And the other thing is, if you get beyond a stage where you can't use outside control, well, you have the 4 plumb up points to use to lay out.
Well, and that's what I was thinking about, because I'm thinking 30 stories, right? Which I've never done. I've never done anything more than about 6 stories myself.
The wind does not need to blow that day.
Yeah, I could see that being a huge issue. But I was sitting here thinking about, I worked with a guy. I helped him. He had an S7, Trimble S7 robot that he was using on Scarlet Pearl, the parking garage down here.
Right.
So his robot blew over, and so I loaned him mine. And I got to talk to him. And I mean, that's only like 4 or 5 stories, his parking garage. But he was explaining to me how he had his control set up. So I'm sitting here thinking about the way you're doing layout. His control was basically off-site. So he had those little reflective stickers around, and he used that to resection. Well, 4 or 5 stories up, you could probably see those just fine. But 30 stories up, it's going to be hard to see those. That's a long way up.
Yeah.
Not to mention that just plumbing the instrument up itself and the inherent error associated with making sure your gun is level. And the vertical change from the ground, 200-300 foot up, it gets significant.
It does. But what you tend to try to do is you bring up, if you're in a city, you try to use control or outside resection on buildings that are around you. If you don't have those buildings, you really have to use your plumb up points.
Wow.
So
That's a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and that's what every layout engineer, setting out engineer is challenged with, to bring a building up plumb, and that's what's most important, that the building is sitting plumb. And as regards sway, I suppose that's really the structural engineers, down to them to design it so that the sway is minimized.
So, when you say plumb, I've got visions in my head of some of the training I've had, GPS training and stuff. So when you really get down to plumb is really about mass. So you could take a plumb bob on a mountaintop somewhere, and that plumb bob may not point towards the center of the earth. It may point towards the center of that mass. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm sitting here thinking 30 stories up. Where's plumb? What's underneath the ground? Where is plumb at 30 stories? I mean, just the complications involved with taking that control all the way up. And I mean, let's just forget about the tripod, right? I mean, you've actually done a great job by solving that issue.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that is just phenomenal. But I mean, as a surveyor and experienced with layout, I'm sitting here, my brain is going 100 miles an hour thinking about bringing that control.
I mean, for me, my experience is about 4 stories is about as far as I've been off the ground. And
that was hard enough.
That was hard enough, exactly. But to me, each floor almost has its independent control on each floor as it goes up. I know that can't be the case because it has to all tie together, but at the same time, I'm just thinking, I'm on the 22nd story here, and that thing's got a little sway to it, and I can't get directly over my plumb point, and I'm trying to lay something out on that floor, so then my control is now isolated to this floor, essentially.
So what's the most sway that you've seen? I mean, when you've been up, higher floors, what's the most sway that you've seen?
Well, there was a 26-story building I was working on in London, and the way this building was, there was temporary steel supports brought up through the building as the building was rising to support it until it was fully built. And so those temporary, until those steels went in place, it moved up to 20 millimeters back and forth.
What? That's
significant.
Yeah, that's
nearly an inch. Yeah. So that's what you're up against. And until the supports are put in place, and when the supports are put in place, then that's why it was brought down to a few millimeters. But that's why the structural engineer's job is so important, to ensure that the sway is minimized in the structure as it is rising. And if there is temporary supports required, then they have to be implemented.
So how long have you been doing this? How long have you been doing layout work? Since when?
I started in 2001. So 20 years, yeah. So I've been involved in it. Yeah, I suppose the last number of years, I will always have something to lay out. I always try to keep on top of the new equipment coming in. But my focus, I suppose, primarily now is the SurvIpod and implementing new products and listening to surveyors, seeing what issues they may have, and trying to come up with ideas and innovations to help them.
I could see part of your marketing being almost like training classes, right? Because I mean, like me, I mean, 35 years I've surveyed. I've done a lot of construction layout, roadways, buildings, stuff like that, but I've never done a high-rise building. If somebody was to come to me and say, "Hey, Robert, I need you to lay out this 30-story building," I'd be like, "Huh?"
Yeah, that's outside of my realm of expertise. Sure.
I mean, and I've done like hospitals and stuff like that. Where I've actually had to go back and QC the I-beam, the piers, and locations and stuff, while another surveyor did the layout and things like that. And I'm pretty comfortable with that. But to go and lay out a 30-story building, there's a level of expertise there that not everybody has.
Well, and not
There is.
everybody can obtain. I mean, we don't have high
Well,
rise.
I think you can. I think it's like anything. You build. You arrive on a new site and you look at the drawings and you think, how are we going to build that? It's a big project. And you think, and you look at it as a whole, a project as a whole, and you think that's a lot of work. But you can only build something bit by bit. And it's the same with high rise. You start at the bottom and you do it bit by bit, and that's how you, I suppose, learn. And everything is only built in pieces. It's all pieces and you put it all together. And that's the way, for me in construction, that's the way I do it. Everything might look complicated when you look at the overall structure, but you can only do it bit by bit.
Today we're laying out the 16th floor, right?
Yeah, like it does get easier as you go up in part, I suppose. In most structures, the floor layout is the same on every floor. So it gets easier for the engineer. But what I've found in more recent years is that architects have become more inventive in what they want to. So every floor is different. Every floor is curved in and out potentially. Columns are at different angles. I've had one of the last projects I worked on in the UK had sloped columns, and they all had a different angle and sloped in different directions. It wasn't.
Let's take a complicated matter and complicate it some more.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And you're saying that, and I'm thinking about like Dubai and some of those buildings. I mean, really hadn't thought. I was watching like what is it, Fast 5 or whatever it is, that
the Fast and Furious series.
Fast and Furious, yeah. Where he jumps that building,
Right.
In
Dubai,
yeah. I never really thought about it until this discussion, but think about that building that he jumped out of, right? There was a surveyor that laid that out, and that is a crazy-looking building.
Yeah.
And I bet he used a SurvIpod.
Yeah, maybe he did. Well, one of the most high-profile ones that the products have been used on is the Shard in London. So I can't. It's at the moment it's been used on a lot of high-profile projects, but it's difficult for me to find out. The resellers sell to the customers, so it's not. I don't have the relationship with the customers. It's used on many high-profile projects in the UK and in the US now with companies in the US. So it's but for me it's difficult to get to exact locations of where they are unless the users let me know. But,
yeah, you need to do like a contest, right? Send me some pictures and I'll send you some goodies, right? Something like that. I'll send you a cake. Yeah. How's that? I'll bake you a cake if you'll send me a picture.
Yeah, I think it's something like that, I suppose. But I have done it before, and really it's about people need to visualize how the products can be used and to understand that they will be a benefit to them and not be a cumbersome addition to their surveying equipment. Just there will be something that will, I suppose, they'll save a lot of money by buying products because they will most likely at some stage in their career their instrument will be knocked over. And if you can avoid that in most parts, why wouldn't you do it?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and also, I mean, the price tag on one of these is, I mean, you can buy a tripod, like a Crane Trimax tripod's like $420 or so. I can't remember what it is now, but anyway, something like that. So, I mean, it's not like you're spending thousands of dollars for this thing. I mean, it's what I was looking at on your website and stuff and some different things I looked at as far as the pricing and stuff. I mean, it's like, it's a no-brainer in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think
it's a reasonable price for something that will save you a lot of money potentially. If no one wants their instrument to go over for whatever project you're working on, and the instrument goes over, then you're letting down your customer or your client, and then as well as that, obviously your insurance. You're going to have to claim in your insurance. You're going to have to go through all that administrative procedure, and then your insurance premium will rise the following year. Or if you don't use a claim on your insurance, you're going to have to pay for it yourself, and it can become very expensive.
Well, from my experience, and especially I've been doing sales now for about the last 15 years, so I work pretty close with a lot of surveyors all over the Southeast. So here's the big thing that I found out is that your instrument gets knocked over, you're in the middle of a project. They have called you to do layout because they need you to lay this out because tomorrow they're pouring concrete, right?
Absolutely.
If
they never call you a week in advance.
That's right. They never. 2 days in advance would be awesome sometimes, but so the thing that I see a lot that happens is that something will happen to their equipment, and it's not like. And I have a problem with my office, right? Because the guys that are there are not surveyors, and they don't understand. You don't have an extra $30,000 piece of equipment sitting in the corner just because, I might knock this over, so I need to buy 2 instead of buying 1. It don't work that way. So when that instrument gets knocked over, I mean, it's a lot more than the expense of the instrument. The guy that I was talking about at the Scarlet Pearl down here, one of the casinos at parking garage, his S7 got knocked over. He went into panic mode. I guess he was already kind of running behind on stuff. So it got knocked over. He jumped in the truck, drove all the way to Lafayette, Louisiana, about 3 hours away, had Ken Como work until 7 o'clock that night recalibrating that gun. But he was in such a big hurry, Ken couldn't really thoroughly go through the gun, right? Because the only thing anybody thought about was it needed to be recalibrated because it fell over. So Ken checked it, made sure the angles were good and everything. Well, guess what? There's this little ribbon in there that goes around the EDM. And this ribbon, when it hit the ground, apparently had expanded. Every shot he took was 1,500s off. So that's how I ended up getting involved because he went into panic mode. He calls me and he's like, every time I do a resection, everything I do is 1,500s off. So I gave him my gun. I took his. I set a prism up at about 1,000 feet, and then I set one up at about 400 feet. And at 1,000 feet, it was 1,500s off. At 400 feet, it was 1,500s off. That's how I figured out what was going on. But in the meantime,
he's still trying to work.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, all this, him figuring out the 1,500s, and then me driving over. Yeah. He was lucky that I was actually in the neighborhood. I mean, it took me, till that afternoon to get over there. But in the meantime, he's getting behind on layout. Like I said, he didn't have an extra one in his pocket. So
yeah, you can't get behind on layout. You just can't. You have to be ahead all of the time of the work. And if you're not, the whole project will stop. And that's the difficulty. You can't just continue and hopefully the layout will be correct. You have to have and that's why I suppose if you use something like my products, most likely that's not going to happen to you. And it won't be a concern. You can walk away from your robotic and know that it won't get knocked over.
So this guy, the problem he had was wind. So if he'd had your product, that would have never happened to him. Because down here, when you're doing, we had a deal that we did last week on flood certificates, and you have what's called the V zone, which is a velocity zone. Because the Scarlet Pearl is like you could throw a rock and hit the Gulf of Mexico, right? So you have a lot of wind that comes in. So he's set up on top of this building, and a big gust of wind blows his tripod over with that, what's an S7, probably $25,000 piece of equipment, hits the ground, hits concrete, no less.
Yeah. And really, even if it is repaired, you will always worry if you are accurate with your equipment. And after that, you always want your equipment to be perfect. And having a repair, having fallen from a few story building onto concrete, I wouldn't be confident in using that equipment again.
Oh, and I can't tell you, and it's funny because me dealing with surveyors, I've had several of them over the years that, somebody backed into their tripod, knocked their gun over, blah, 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 $3,000 in repair. And tell your insurance company, this is a high precision piece of equipment and you want it replaced. You don't want it repaired because your livelihood depends on that piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I tell people. Don't get it repaired. This guy was just like in a super panic, right? So he's trying to do this layout, and I'm guessing that he must have been getting behind because literally because of this, he ended up getting fired from that project. Of course, they were just about to the end, so I think it was kind of like,
it was inevitable.
Yeah, it was like, we're not paying this guy anymore. Get rid of him. But so yeah, I mean, that would have really been beneficial for him to have something like that.
Yeah, that's really what you have to look at, I suppose. This is your livelihood, and in most, whether it's you're working for a company and it's their livelihood, it's everyone that works in surveying. if you're working in this field, you don't want that to happen. And some people say, well, if I put sandbags on my tripod, it'll be okay. But still, if you have workers working around you with heavy reinforcement, the sandbags aren't going to stop that getting knocked over, really.
And it goes back to the control we talked about a while ago, right? I mean, you're trying to keep millimeter accuracy.
Yeah.
And sandbags on a tripod's not going to get you millimeter accuracy. The Trimble equipment has what's called sure point. So what it does is it will correct itself. So if you get out of level up to 6 minutes, the gun will correct itself. Well, the reason that I've heard people talk about before, and I've actually seen it a couple times, that the instrument would vibrate. And what it's doing is they don't understand the tripod is actually moving. Mm-hmm. So when the tripod moves, the gun compensates for it. And then when it compensates, the tripod moves again. So next, what you got going on then is a vibration, because you've got the gun trying to correct and the tripod moving and the gun trying to correct, and it just keeps going back and forth. So you just think about that with a tripod.
Especially on hot asphalt.
Yeah.
It walks the whole time.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look at, even with sandbags on a tripod, you still have that same thing's going on. Because, it amazes me with surveyors. They'll go out and spend $70,000 on a pickup truck, but they're scared to spend $400 for a tripod. And they'll have that tripod is like 15 years old, right? And they've never put a wrench to it. I see that stuff all the time.
Yeah. No, you have to know what to spend money on, and to know that it's going to keep you in work, and you have to have continuity in your work. If you don't have the money coming in. It's just the way it is.
Well, and reputation in this industry, in the surveying industry, reputation is everything. If you don't have a good reputation, you're not working, especially on projects like that. Because the last thing a contractor wants to do is hire some, Jake leg that went out and spent, $5,000 for a total station, and he's trying to do the layout, and he's got a tripod that doesn't even have any paint on it anymore, because he's had it for 15 years, and he's out there trying to do layout. And if he screws up, then the contractor has to go back and tear out whatever it was he was doing and replace it. And you want to talk about expensive. And you get into liquidated damages. I'm sure you have the same thing there. So like I've worked on a lot of Walmart projects, like Walmart stores and warehouses and stuff like that. Their liquidated damages is, I believe it's 10% of the estimated gross profit per day for a Walmart. That's liquidated damages. You want to talk about people lighting a fire underneath people. You get on one of those projects where there's those kind of liquidated damages, you don't have time to get a new instrument out there. Just FedEx one to me. Yeah, just send it ground. It'll be here in 3 days. No. You're driving to the distribution warehouse, and you're picking that instrument up and you're bringing it back, because it could cost you $100,000. Liquidated damages. And the contractor's going to point back at you. So, I mean, I can see where, the security of the equipment is just the utmost importance.
Paramount. Well, James,
it is.
What can we see in the future coming from you? You said you were working on some new stuff. So what can we see coming out in the future that may be of interest to us?
Well, really what I'm looking at is relative products that relate to the SurvIpod. So what I'm looking at is tunnel versions of the product, where you can set up the product can be fixed to the ceiling of a tunnel. And I'm also looking at cages, my own cages for the instruments, so you can set up and monitor securely. I have one of those made, and I'm trialing it at the moment. So they're the kind of things I'm looking at in the background. And also a removable sleeve, where at the moment the sleeve that I have, you cast in and it's part of the structure. I'm looking at a removable sleeve at the moment, and that sleeve can be reused up to 200 times, that sleeve. So that's been trialed at the moment as well. So these are the things I'm looking at, but mostly will relate to the existing products that I have.
Sure.
Well, I think expanding a little bit, like I was talking about with GPS and stuff like that, other survey equipment, it would be a great idea. But, Trimble right now, they come out with that SX12, that new scanning total station. it's got a green laser in it. The whole concept behind that green laser and the reason that they basically come out this is because they're getting into tunneling and mining and stuff like that. So that sounds pretty. And I've actually surveyed inside of a mine. I've been, a mile or two underneath the ground, something like that. Long way down. We traversed in, and the whole thing went down like this. And we just kept going in. The only problem I could see mounting it to the ceiling, because we were using spads, in the ceiling. And the only problem that I see is that you'd be walking down through there and there'd be this big pile of rubble. And that was from the ceiling.
Yeah.
Makes you a little nervous when you're about a mile underneath the ground, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're in this hole that's, you got about, a 2 foot above your head. So, traversing all the way down to that back wall and coming back out was insane. And, so I can see that would be, you'd almost be better off in that situation instead of the ceiling, mounting it to the side, depending on the tunnel and how it is. They used, in this one that I worked in, this coal mine, it's down in Hartford, Arkansas, down south. And they used Kubotas, like UTVs, right? Utility vehicles.
Yeah.
And they took the top off of them. And I saw places when they would go through there, they'd all be leaning backwards to keep, from hitting their head on the top of the tunnel. So it's
no, thank you.
Yeah, that was it's one of those things I think every surveyor should experience, but it's not a career choice. You know what I'm saying?
I would. I'd like to have had a more varied experience. My experiences in grounds work and high rise and commercial low rise. I would like to have worked on infrastructure, bridges, and there's a lot of large bridge projects that I would have seen, and I would have liked to have worked on some of them, but it's just the way it is. You can't have everything.
So my experience is really diverse, right? So right out of high school, the first thing I did is I came to Montgomery, Alabama, a job. I was actually a welder right out of high school, and so I went and built bridges. I actually welded on bridges, putting stiffeners in, taking the crane, carrying them. The big, I got up on top of some of those beams, and you had this gun, and you put the ceramic deal in it, and you put one of these, basically it's one of the ties to the concrete, right? So you'd actually have to get up there and you'd pull the trigger on it, and it would weld that thing to it. And then we had a dark welder, and this thing smelled like molasses whenever it was working. So I would tack the stiffeners in, and then this machine would come along and weld. And when I decided to go into surveying was when it was 14 degrees, and the frost that was on top of the building. Now, this building was huge, and the frost would melt, and when it would hit that steel, it would freeze. And one of the guys, his name was Keith. I wanted to say Keith Nobles or something like that. I didn't think I'd ever forget this guy. And we're all standing around this barrel. We've got wood in this barrel. And, I mean, it's 14 degrees is when they called it. And they'd be right at 14. If it'd go down 1 degree, we could go to the house. But 14 degrees, we're still working. And I can remember Keith to this day. He had one like a high school letterman type jacket on. And he's standing there, and I walk up there and pull my gloves off. And I'm looking at him going, Keith, there's smoke coming off of you. Turn around. He turned around, and the whole back of his jacket was melted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, you're a little too close to the fire. My boots, steel-toe boots, and I would take the cutting torch, and because the stiffeners, whenever you put those in there, you had to, they come as just one piece of metal, right? You had to take and trim them. But so you were always carrying a cutting torch with you. And I would take that cutting torch, and I would heat my boots up, my steel-toe boots, because my feet would just get brutally cold. So my boots always looked burnt because taking that torch and heating. That's when I said I got to go do something else. So it's kind of cool that I got the experience of building the bridges because I've laid out a ton of them, right, over the years. So it's kind of a unique perspective. But, the thing about it is in surveying, I totally believe that you have to be like specialized in something. If you're surveying and you're a boundary surveyor, everybody's a boundary surveyor around here. So, but if you're specialized in construction layout or a particular type, is something specific, you can actually make a good living. Otherwise you just have another job, right? So, I wouldn't be too, You know, I mean, having the experience would be great, but having your experience that you have is pretty awesome. I don't have that experience. I've done all the infrastructure. I've done buildings and sewer and bridges and all that kind of stuff, different things. Colt here's got a lot of experience in hydro work, and that's something I don't have a lot of experience in. But I think that, you know, each one of us, if we specialize in just one particular thing, we do well. I mean, you've obviously done really good with this this tool that you've created. You're not doing layout anymore. You're creating tools.
Yeah, I think it's something that I think you don't come across something like that. Look, you know, I came up with the idea, but really you have to drive it forward. A lot of engineers and surveyors have good ideas, but really you have to be willing to push it forward and stick with it. And that's what I've done, and that's how it's shown dividends, I suppose, and pushed it out to people when you have to believe in your product, and that's how you sell it. You have to just believe that it will work, and it is working, and that's if you have a belief where you are an idea, if you have an idea where you think this will benefit other surveyors, well, my advice would be to trial it on a small scale, and if it works, well then potentially you will have a market if it works for you. And that's how I did it. I did it initially on a small scale, manufactured small quantities, and sold locally in the UK, and then it grew from there, and it's all over the UK now, and really spreading all over the world now. So it's just something that, and most of the time it's by word of mouth. It's surveyors moving different companies, and it's other people rising from engineer to contracts managers and that, and they bring the ideas with them and they move company, and that's what works.
Yeah, and isn't it cool though? I mean, you get to talk to people all over the place. Like with my social media stuff I'm doing in YouTube and everything, I actually was Facebooking with a guy from Siberia. You know what I mean? Isn't that cool how you can get to talk to people? I mean, have maybe a literal conversation with somebody halfway around the world, right? Like what we're doing right now, right? So,
Yeah,
you know, it's crazy. So it's like it's almost 7 o'clock here. So it's what, almost 1 o'clock there?
almost 1 o'clock here. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I suppose like I speak to people from South America, countries in South America, to people in like I said, in Greenland. I got a call that was a couple of months ago, and I didn't really expect. I saw the number from Greenland, and it's a very short number, and I thought, what's happening here? I thought it was a dodgy number, but really it was a company. It was a Danish company working in Greenland on a new airport, and the engineer was from the north of England, and he knew I was connected to him on LinkedIn. So, and then that led to the product being used widely on that project in Greenland. And it's just you don't know who you're going to talk to the following day. It's just the way it is. I could speak to people from India, China, everywhere, from every country in the world. It's just the way it is, and it's a great experience. I would never have thought I would have been doing what I'm doing. So I'm really glad that it's working out. So
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's like I said. I mean, you got a beautiful product. I mean, I love what you've done with the powder coating and you know, with your logo and everything else. And your I was looking at your website. The video that you had created is really cool. It's animated. So where'd that come from?
yeah, well, it took me a long time to find a company that would create something like that. And really, I wanted something that I could adjust or if I could add to very easily. So I found a company called Kinesimania in the UK, and they were absolutely amazing to work with. And I went through. They covered every detail of if you look at the video or the animation, you can see every detail, including angles of the sun. Everything was taken into consideration when it was pulled together, and I'm very impressed with what they've produced. But a very good company to work with in the UK.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I watched the video and I actually I just did an unboxing, or well, not wasn't an unboxing. It was a Tuesday tip, and it was how to connect up the TSC5 and everything. So at the end of it, I talk about we're going to do this podcast, right? So I actually stole part of that video off of your website and stuck it on that YouTube thing. So yeah, I was watching it and I was like, this is just crazy cool.
Little
how they
commercial
put that together. Yeah, a little commercial there. So it's really interesting. You really should take that and try to figure out how to like throw that all over social media so that, you know, people can watch, because I mean it's an animated, I don't know what to call it, cartoon or it's not even a cartoon. I mean it's like really cool.
It's an explainer. It's an animated explainer video, and I suppose you can do whatever you want in it. But clearly, for me, I had to explain to people that didn't understand fully the benefits of the products. And if you're a surveyor, hopefully, by watching the animation, you'll understand clearly. And that was the aim.
Yeah, if you don't understand after watching that, you need to go do something else. They're hiring door graders down at Walmart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I see thousands of uses for the SurvIpod and the equipment that he has here, and the uses on not just high-rise construction. I mean, that's not something that I am very familiar with at all. However, bridge projects, I mean, almost any construction project whatsoever, really any project whatsoever that has control that must be repeatable. And must exist for years and years and years.
Yeah, I can see bridges. I can see it being huge on bridges. So my thought is out here with the one you sent me, I'm wanting to pour concrete out there and take like a sleeve and put that sleeve down in the concrete. So and basically show that, you know, you could go out onto a you know, like a bridge project, right? And you could set that up and take it down. And you know, and every day you come back, you're in the same spot. I mean,
yeah,
if you're set up and you're backsided in the same spot every day, and even two of them, right? One on each side of the creek or whatever you're crossing. Because a lot of bridges, well, down here, down south, some of these bridges are miles long. But a lot of the stuff that I've done has been short, you know, crossing creeks and stuff like that. And maybe you'll have a bunch of bridges. Let's say like, what was that? The highway by Fort Chaffee there in Fort Smith. I was laying out like 5 or 6 bridges at the same time. So it was just a string of bridges down this road. And, you know, I could see having those sleeves poured in concrete on each end of those bridges and be able to just go in there and set that up, backside, and I'm rolling. Because, you know, a lot of the time that you waste is trying to get your control back in, right? So if you've got to go back out and replace some stakes or do something like that, you got to get your control back. And that can be pretty time consuming. If I could just go and set that up and I'm good, oh man, it'd save a ton of time. And surveying time's money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Really, on some projects, they have cast in the original SurvIpod into concrete fully, rather than casting in a sleeve. They just cast in the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you can and just leave it there for the duration of the project or for monitoring. So there's different ways you can use it. And that's the benefit of it. Like on railway, there's another project in the south of England where it's mounted on the bolt-down version is mounted on a pad concrete that they have by the railway, and then it's used every couple of 100 meters then to monitor that railway, and permanently left in position.
Well, I mean, I could see it being huge just in all bridge projects being part of the inspection process. I mean, every so many years, those bridges have to be inspected and what have you. And how easy would it be just to go set up on the control point for the bridge and take your measurements?
Oh, yeah. Well, and monitoring is a big thing now, right? So, you know, monitoring dams and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really cool. You're talking about that box. So you were talking about setting up one to where you could almost permanently mount it, right? So you could put an instrument in it inside of a box, and then you could actually monitor something. You know, down here with the Corps of Engineers, there's a lot of like dam monitorization and stuff like that. So I could see that being huge. You know, and here's another thought, right? So several years ago, I was doing earthen dams. So there was an earthen dam somewhere that broke, and I mean, all across the country, it was like, okay, we're going to go survey every earthen dam. So I probably did about a dozen of them, but they were monitoring these earthen dams. They were worried about them, you know, breaching. So if you had these set up down through there, what we did is we poured concrete monuments off the dam, right, in line with it on each side, and then we would set up on one, backside the other one, and then we had points along there. Well, I could see, I mean, the same thing, right? Instead of putting a monument in the ground and doing that, set one of these things up, bolt it down.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that way your control is always the same.
Yeah. I mean, uses are
Exactly.
are endless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It is. I think really, if you are using surveying equipment, there is a use no matter what type of surveying you're doing. And there was an application, a company in New Zealand actually approached me about using them in agriculture. So using them for GPS in agriculture.
Yeah.
So for monitoring crop growth from the beginning of before the crop was sown, for the duration of crop growth. And it's an application that I wouldn't really have considered before, but they're saying, really what they would like to use them for is to have them as a continuous monitoring process for the crops GPS monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense. And really the applications are there for everyone, really. You can use them as long as you have a foundation to fix to or to cast in. The products can definitely be used, and just the same as you can use it on steel as well. So applications are endless, which is good.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Well, listen, it is a little after 7 here. I know you've got to go pick up a young one, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right.
Daycare, high school, what?
No, she's in her first year of school, so she's only 5 years old. So
oh my gosh. I'm an old man, I just turned 54, so I got grandkids, right? So,
right.
I remember those days, and here's a word of advice. As you get older, you'll realize this. Cherish those days like today where you've got to go get her, because there will come a time in your life when you're going to go do the same thing and pick up your grandkid. And it's going to be really hard for you to as you get older, your heart gets a little softer, right? So
yeah.
Right now it's like, I got things to do. I really don't have time to go pick her up right now, but I've got to go do it. As you get older, you're like, I got to go pick up my grandkid. I got to go pick up my grandkid. It's amazing as you get older how your thought process changes. So enjoy it now while you can.
Yeah.
And cherish those memories, right? Take lots and lots of pictures. That would be mine. Don't let stuff like this interfere with that, right? So we're going to get off here. We're going to let you go. We've consumed a whole bunch of your time, man. I really, really appreciate it. This has been a blast. I could talk to you like for the next 3 days.
Absolutely. James, we appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks very much, guys. Thank you.
I'll be in contact with you. I'm going to try to get out here hopefully before too long. Time is something that I am very short supply of. But I'm going to try to get out here and get this thing set up, and I'll be hollering at you here pretty soon as I get all that put together. So,
lovely.
Greatly appreciate it. Have a great day, man. Go enjoy. Go get some ice cream or something, right?
Lovely. Thanks very much, guys. Take it easy.
We'll see you, man. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Well, I'd really like to thank Colt Ratliff and James Reville for helping me out with this podcast. It was pretty interesting talking to James about surveying in Ireland and his tool and just surveying in general, right? I just thought it was a good conversation. So, James, really appreciate you, buddy. And I will be talking to you soon. I'm working on a video where I'm going to set up his pipes, poles, tripod mounts, whatever you want to call them, the SurvIpod. I'm going to set those up out in the yard, and I'm actually going to use those in some of my videos. So you guys stay tuned for that. That'll be probably coming up sometime this summer when I can get a chance to get everything done and it quits raining in this part of the country. So anyways, guys, appreciate it. As always, love you. Take care. Be careful. And I will see you guys in the next video, and maybe you'll hear me on the podcast. Who knows? So guys, like and subscribe. As always, love you guys.